John testified concerning him. He cried out, saying, "This is the one I spoke about when I said, 'He who comes after me has surpassed me because he was before me.' Out of his fullness we have all received grace in place of grace already given. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known."
Thanks, Judy. Just before we start this, let me say they've switched off the time. Oh no, the time's back again, so you'll know whether the sermon goes for an hour or two. That's good. I had a text from a lady at Liquid who told me that Kerry Brown did an outstanding job with the carols at Mount Eliza last night. And Mount Martha, was it? Yeah, 2,000 people there, and she was a kingpin as far as the organisation was concerned. That's tremendous. Now, I'm going to play you a little piece of music. It's got nothing to do with Christmas, but I want you to tell me what it is, and if you get the author right, you get extra points for that. And I'll make a point about it. And let's hope this works. Now, hang on, wait a minute. It's a bit Spanish. Anybody work it out? Don't tell me yet. You worked it out, Cliff?
I know it, but I can't tell you.
You will in a minute. It's by Bizet. That's how I get an extra point. Now you'll know. Yeah, hang on.
No, I have got the name written now.
That's not what I had in mind. Okay, James, you reckon you know it?
I thought it was actually roll
It what? Roll. Carmen, yes, well done. Toreador, now, you know, that bit. Toreador, now, da-da-da-da-da. Don't spit on the floor. That's the song I remember. Okay, now, I play that. Here, stop it now, thanks. I played that for you for a special reason. It's an overture. And as you listen to Bizet's overture, you hear every theme that's going to be in the opera Carmen. And there are a lot quite like that, the William Tell overture and so on. And what we're hearing this morning, am I on the air, by the way? Yep. What we're hearing this morning, and what we've heard, is John is basically an overture, an introduction to every theme that you will find in John's Gospel. And as we work our way through this, we're going to discover that what John says in the first 18 verses sums up the rest of John's Gospel. And I hope next year we might have an opportunity to go through John's Gospel. It's an absolutely marvellous, mysterious type of book, completely different to Matthew, Mark and Luke. Now, what Lorraine said today, I want to reiterate. She said that when we hear John's Gospel, when we look at the Christmas story, we don't hear about angels, we don't hear about shepherds, we don't hear about Herod, with no Mary, no Joseph. He takes us up. Those, Matthew, Mark and Luke, sort of deal with the grassroots of it. John gives us an overall perspective of what Christmas is all about. Let's go through it. Now, first of all, he says this. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was God. And he uses the word logos. Logos, what does it mean? It's a Greek word for word, and when you look at the Old Testament and you go from the Hebrew to the Greek, etc., it reflects the mind of God. The mind of God became flesh and dwelt among us. And when we look at the Old Testament, we see the power of God's word. God said, he said in Genesis 1. The prophets say, the word of the Lord came to me. And it's no mistake that John uses the word logos. It means something to the Hebrews, it means something to the Greeks, but it means that the mind of God became flesh amongst us. And in effect, he's saying, Jesus, at the beginning, Jesus was with God. All things were made through Jesus, and without him not was anything made. And this is very high Christology. This is awesome, to use that word. And when we start seeing that, we start to see the magnificence of the Christmas story. And what John is saying to us, Bethlehem was not the beginning of the process. It all started at creation. God was there at creation. God was there at Bethlehem as well. Now, just to bore you a little bit more, let me tell you about the 4th century. There was a tremendous blue happening in the church. And a guy called Arian, anybody ever heard of him before? I can't tell you what I liked him. Arian was a guy who didn't believe that. He believed that God created Jesus sometime in the destiny of eternity. And that's why when we sing, God of light, God of love, lo, he abhors not the virgin's womb, and very God, not begotten, but created. Begotten, not created. It's trying to preserve the theology of John's Gospel. Now, what does it mean? It means that when the Jehovah's Witnesses come knocking at your door and they tell you that Jesus was the chief angel, you say, no, he was there at the very beginning. He is the mind of God. When the adoptionist says to us that Jesus became the Son of God at the time of his baptism, we say, no. John says he was there at the very beginning. When the Christadelphians say that God was adopted at that time, we say, no, he was there at the very beginning. And it's been a struggle through the ages to preserve the concept of Trinity. God, Jesus, Holy Spirit are one. One reflects the other. Now, we say it's awesome. I might have told you this before, but let me tell you again. I grew up in Albert Park, and one day I was going back to visit my parents, just about to head down Kerford Road underneath the railway line there, if you know it, and the traffic stopped, policemen. And I waited and waited and waited, and in the end, a motorcycle escort went past, and a big Rolls Royce went past, and another Rolls Royce. And in the second Rolls Royce was the Queen, heading from somewhere back to the Royal Yacht Britannica. And I thought, oh, she might go down Little Page Street where my mum lives. She might stop in. It didn't happen. But even to see the Queen in Kerford Road, where I grew up and played footy on the nature strip and all that type of thing, was absolutely amazing. Get your mind around this, that God became a part of our world, became a part of our planet, and expressed himself in human form. It is awesome when you start thinking about that the Logos became a person. Now, you listen a lot to the radio, and you imagine in your mind, hearing that voice on the radio, what that person actually looks like. You ever had this experience, then you see a photo, or you might see them in person, you say, ooh, now I know why they're on radio and not television. And when you see their face, when you see them in the flesh, when you see them as a person, it changes the whole atmosphere of your understanding of that person. The Logos became flesh. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we're amazed because we're no longer guessing what God is like, but he is, if you like, expressing himself in human form. Another heresy that was around the 1st and 2nd century of the church was a heresy called Docetism. It's a Greek word which means seams. And it says that Jesus became flesh. No, Jesus is actually a spirit. Jesus, when he walked across the sand, he didn't leave footprints behind. And they were trying to preserve, if you like, the divinity of Jesus in that way. But John is quite specific. He became flesh, he became psychos, he dwelt among us, and we now have seen him, now we know what he's like. Does it matter? You bet it matters. Because when we think that Jesus became flesh, we think of our heartaches, we think of our disappointments, we think of the times we've been misunderstood, we think of the accusations that have been made about us, we think of the people who have hurt us in the past, we think of the pain that we go through. Jesus went through all of that. He became flesh and dwelt among us. It is awesome. So, we don't see him as a great prophet. We don't see him as a cute little baby. We don't see Christmas as a time of economic recovery. We don't see him as one leader amongst many. The Word was God. The Word was God. And he also says something to us about the church as well. When we think about this, the church became flesh as well. This is what it said. The Word became flesh and he's dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Now, this means to us, as a church, we're not meant to become a ghetto either. The Word became flesh, and if you like, it was an act of the missionary God. It was God acting as missionary. And here is, if you like, the blueprint for the church. We are meant to become flesh. We are meant to become a part of our world. I don't wear a collar, and those of you who've been in ministry in Churches of Christ don't wear a collar. And there's some theological reason for it, but I think it's really to make sure we drive properly. I think that's what it's about. But in wearing a collar, I'm not knocking my ministry mates who do this, but in wearing a collar, you set yourself apart. And if people immediately know what you're on about, etc., etc. And in dressing in civic clothes, we identify with the people. The Salvation Army, someone was telling me about the Salvos in Mornington, I think it is, that they don't wear uniform at all these days, in order to just identify with the people. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And here we are seeing the missionary God in action. And it makes me think about the language we use in church. One of the greatest compliments, I think I've said this to you before, one of the greatest compliments that's been made to me was when a guy came out of the church one morning, and he was new to the church, and he said to me, "I understood every word that you said." And I thought about that. And I thought about the cliches we often use, and the cliches that mean nothing to people who are driving past, walking past, and sometimes we speak in another language. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen him glory. And then John goes on to say, in him was life. In him was life, and the light was all mankind. This is Genesis all over again. Remember Genesis 2, where God breathed into the human form and it became alive? And when you look at the Gospel of John, he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He comes to that guy who was lying on a bed for 37 years, unable to get himself into the pool of Siloam, and he says, stand up and walk. Why did he say that? Because the guy had limited existence. He had no life, and Jesus became the source of life for him. We read in the paper, and perhaps you've experienced that in your journey itself, some people end up in hospital and they use the term brain dead. Very unfortunate term. And it really means that the only part of their brain that is working is the part that causes respiration and heartbeat. And eventually they switch off the machine. And I've been involved in that process, and it's very cruel and very sad. People often are brain dead. When you look at their lives and the way they live, it seems as if they're brain dead. No purpose, no direction. And as a contrast, we read that in him was life, and the light was the light of men. I remember our neighbour once saying to us about how frustrating life was. And she says, I go to work, and wait for this, I go to work to pay for the car I need to go to work in. No purpose, brain dead. And in him was life, and the life was if you like, the light of men. Now, I was driving around the other day and I heard, listening to the ABC, which I do, and on they came a grief counsellor. And grief counsellors have a special time at Christmas. And you know about it. You know that at Christmas time you remember someone who used to sit at the table with you and no longer does. Or perhaps you've been single and you're alone and all those type of things. It is a time of sadness. And I acknowledge that. But at the same time, it is a time of joy. It is a time of joy because the world for us will never be the same again, because the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Then John introduces a theme that is very, very strong in John's Gospel. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Now, he was, of course, talking about the law, the Jewish people living under law, living in darkness. And light becomes a very prominent theme at Christmas time. Marge decided that she'd go down to the cheap shop the other day and buy a string of lights. And we're going to put them up on the front of our house as a witness to ourselves that Jesus is the light of the world. And Marge was not allowed to climb ladders, but she did. And she put all the lights up, and we're about to switch it on, and a cocky came along and straight through the cord and no lights. But it makes me think of the guy who lives around the corner from us in Crib Point. Each year, and this story could be repeated right across Melbourne, each year he decked the front of his house with lights galore. And it was a massive, great display, and the cars queued up. And 3 or 4 days later, after Christmas, if you hadn't seen it by then, it was too late, because he stopped the compressor, he turned off the lights and packed it away till next Christmas. He didn't bring it out this year. I don't know why. But that's the story with the light displays. But this light that Jesus is talking about is a light which not be quenched by anything. It goes on and on and on. Have you ever been in the house when the power goes off? Whew, darkness. You race around, you find a torch, or you find candles. And those little candles, it's amazing what the difference it makes. It makes you start to see forms that you couldn't see before. And that's where the philosopher says it's better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. And when I think of what's happening in Gaza, how can Jesus be the light of the world in that terrible situation? And our giving will make a small difference, a very small difference, but it makes some difference. It is better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. Jesus is the light of the world. And then it goes on to say in John's Gospel that the world did not know him. He came to his own people, and his people did not know him. And that's the story, isn't it? You could go to Japan right now, and Japan would be one of the most secular nations in the world. Right? No Christianity is, I think, about 0.5%. A few Buddhists, but generally no religion. And they're celebrating Christmas. Lights everywhere, Christmas trees everywhere, gifts are given, the shops are very, very busy. And you can go to Thailand, a Buddhist country, and they celebrate Christmas. And same thing, they don't really understand what it's all about. Japan, Thailand, Australia, exactly the same. Most people do not understand. And some of our people that we mix with haven't a clue about Mary and Joseph and all that type of thing. And when we come together as Christian people, our Christianity gives us another dimension as far as Christmas is concerned. We're celebrating what it's really all about. Not about gift giving, not about stress, not about anxiety, but celebrating the fact that the world became flesh. Now, it's interesting when I say all that about Australians. It's interesting when you think of the next day, tomorrow, that Christmas Day, a lot of people will be in church, and there'll be more people on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day then pack the MCG for the grand final. But then John goes on to say a very interesting thing. No one has ever seen God, but the Father, Jesus, has made him known. No one has ever seen God, but Jesus has made him known. Now, this is a great fact about Jesus, the Christmas time. There's this vague God who does some pretty awful things in the Old Testament, is suddenly made known as a God of love. To revisit what I was saying before, during COVID, there was a church in New South Wales that interviewed a minister in Victoria, but they couldn't meet face to face. And they interviewed him and appointed him without ever meeting him or without him ever meeting them. And let me tell you that they all had a few surprises. The fact that you can do it face to face makes a big difference. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And when we see the compassion of Jesus, when we see him healing, when we see him teaching, when we see him helping the disabled, and when we see him wanting the gospel to be spread, we are seeing God in action. That's what it's all about. Not a projection of my personality, not a God that I want to be there, not dependent on culture, but completely independent. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. This is the great revolution of Christmas, that the God who was really not known is revealed in Jesus Christ. And if you stay with Mary and Joseph and the stable, and if you stay with the baby, and if you stay with that type of the Christmas story as presented in the Synoptic Gospels, you miss out, because you don't really understand that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We haven't missed out. We acknowledge this awesome God has visited our planet and become a part of us. And when we celebrate communion, we do it with a sense of joy because God has revealed himself to us. And as we take the bread and take the cup, we give thanks to God for this amazing gift of himself and the fact that he revealed himself so that we really know what God is like. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Thank you, God. God our Father, as we come to this time of communion, we want to give you thanks. We want to give you thanks for this Christmas time, for what it means. Truly you are an awesome God who has revealed yourself through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Come, celebrate communion. Celebrate the fact that God has given and revealed himself in Jesus Christ. If you're a visitor with us, you're also welcome to come and take the bread.